Welcome to my next Channelside Chat, and this kicks off a new multi-part series on deck building. By the end of this first video in the series, you should be equipped to think about the role of every card while building any deck. Apologies for the slow start with this one, but I need to begin by defining precise terminology for the rest of this series. Let's start with Starter. This is the basic building block of any strategy, as it is the card that kicks off your combos for the turn. Regardless of deck type, you'll want to have some form of starter. Most of the best starters require the normal summon, but a select few don't even need that at all. In Evil Eye, for example, the starter is typically Surziel, Watcher of the Evil Eye. Moving along to the next key term, that would be Extender. Cards that serve as extenders do exactly as you'd expect. They advance your plays, extending your current cards into more special summons, more searches, more effect activations, etc. Now this term can also be expanded into two subcategories, which I refer to as Basic Extender and Reactive Extender. Basic Extenders are cards that extend your plays under any situation, with no opponent influence. If you were in the sad state of playing alone in a dark room, your Basic Extenders would let you keep playing and continuing your turn. On the other hand, Reactive Extenders are cards that keep your play going due to an opponent's reaction. These extenders require the opponent to do something, have something on their field, or have met some additional criteria. While this can be an arbitrary distinction, I often see duelists overlook this second category for being too situational, even though they can still have their utility in the right situations. Moving along to our next category, we have Interactives. This card classification also breaks down into two categories. For me, the first is Interrupt. Interrupt interactives are cards that stop the opponent in their tracks in the middle of their plays. For example, Card by the Grave is an Interrupt interactive when it is used to disable an activated hand trap to prevent you from playing. Another good example is the commonly played hand traps themselves, such as Ghost Ogre or Ash Blossom. The second category, Disrupt interactives, are used during a break in the flow of the game. Examples here include Raigeki or Dark Hole, which disrupt a board of monsters the opponent has, or Called by the Grave, used here preemptively to prevent a Water Enchantress of the Temple from activating its effect while in the graveyard. Next up is Engine Requirement. I defined this in my previous Upstart Goblin video, but the short description is that these are cards you do not want to draw. Instead, you want them in your deck to be used as material, or to summon directly from the deck later in the turn, like Fallen of Albaz when running a Branded Fusion engine. As the final catch-all category, we have Tech Choice. These are options that are exclusively included in your deck list to fill some niche role, for either specific matchups or to respond to specific situations that is difficult for your deck to overcome. Another way to think about these cards is cards that you more typically find in a side deck, such as Cosmic Cyclone. Now that I've spent way too much time on definitions, let's talk about how this practically relates to deck building. And it all starts with identifying the archetype that you're trying to build does best. In practice, the difference between archetypes is typically found by which of the card roles the theme naturally emphasizes. Let me explain this through examples. I'm going to start with Dragon Link. This entire strategy exists to extend your plays as far as possible using dragons of all shapes, sizes, archetypes, or whatever. It works off of a flexible number of starters, all while building up a board of interrupt interactives at the very end. Another strategy to highlight here is Madolke. This archetype runs a wide array of starters to ensure an on-ramp to what is ultimately the same combo flow game to game, in order to OTK after disrupting an established board. Another example is Tearlaments. This Aqua Fusion theme is extremely great at extending your plays and has a number of starters of their own, but it actually works even better with starters and extenders from other archetypes that really accentuate the theme well. So you may be asking, why does thinking about archetypes in this way matter? Because that's what lets you identify where you need to devote more of your additional deck space to shoring up weaknesses. If a theme has plenty of one-card starters, you can dedicate a much larger portion of your deck to interrupts, disrupts, or tech choices, since you can still guarantee getting those plays off. I threw up Salamangreat here because they're a great example of this. And this is why Salamangreat survived so long in the fringes of the meta, even after being pushed out of the top tier by many of the decks listed there. Before closing us out, there's one more piece of this that makes specific archetypes stand out better than others. That's when individual cards from the theme are flexible enough to serve in multiple card classified roles. These are the key cards you need to be aware of when deck building, as many of these flexible options exist as core engine cards that can be used across various decks. Take for example the Adventure engine. This doubles as both a way to gain an interrupt in the form of Wandering Griffin Rider, but it can also extend your plays through all of the special summons inherent to the theme, as well as disrupt an opponent's board with their equip spell, Dracoback the Rideable Dragon. To step back to a more generic example, Reinforcement of the Army is a starter for Ignite FTK, or it can be a basic extender for Infernable Knights, or is only a tech choice for Hero, since they already have tons of search power already. It's just adding more on what the theme already does best. So sometimes cards aren't as easy to identify what theme they are, because they can hold multiple roles across different decks. Or take the third example here, the Kaiju archetype, which is a great example of flexibility as a whole. Interrupted Kaiju Slumber serves as both a starter and a disrupt interactive, while also tutoring another Kaiju as an extender once it's in the graveyard. But the monsters themselves, they're also all disrupt interactives, since they can serve as removal for an opponent's threat, while also being extenders themselves, since they can also be special summoned from your hand to your board easily whenever your opponent has a Kaiju monster. In one sentence, to summarize this entire video, a strong foundation will help you build the right mindset to approach building any deck. After all, these are just your first steps. If you want a challenge and want to test this lesson, take a look at one of my recent CDPs and take a stab at classifying most of the cards in the main deck. As noted, the same card may fill different roles across different strategies. Thanks.